Mere Mortals.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Mere Mortals Musings. We are live here on the Sunday 11th of May 2025. I am your host Kyron here on this side.
You got one on this side too.
Juan, the assertive Juan on the other side. And a musings episode is where we dive deeper into a particular topic. I've chosen today's one. It's all about leadership. I'm not sure we've ever talked about leadership in particular.
Don't know if we haven't.
And so the reason this came up was for just a couple of mini notes that have been taken for a while.
So Kyron's a big Peter Dutton fan. So that was a big thing. So we talked a lot in this podcast about politics and our inability to like it, but Kyron found love in Another Bald Man, and Peter Dutton was right up there with. If you could suck another man off and not be gay, that's what Kyron wanted to do. Leadership. That's what we're talking about today.
So part of it was triggered by one talking about a story last week from going down to Canberra and having to display some leadership qualities. Which he enjoyed. Mm-hmm. And it got me thinking, we haven't talked about this particularly before, and I wanted to compare some notes on maybe what's some good leadership qualities, why I'm not a great leader. We can talk about politics for a teensy little bit. Probably the first one would be when was your first leadership position in life, and did you enjoy it? Have you ever sought them out as well?
I think I was.
When did you know you were going to
captain for soccer in soccer games a few times, but not all the time. But I would have to assume that was quote unquote the first.
Is that in leadership? Primary school, high school?
Primary school. Was that in primary school? No. It would have been high school. It would have been high school when I was playing soccer, not primary school. Okay. Yeah. So that would have been probably the first time, quote unquote, that I was doing a role which technically a leader.
Yep.
And then work-wise, maybe two and a bit years in, where I was looking after a group of people.
Yeah,
I'd sort of say. But beyond then, after that, there's been lots of roles where you kind of look after people. But I think I'll ask you a question back to you. When was the first time, or if you can recognize being I was the leader? No, you were the leader in that role.
Honestly, I'm really struggling to think of a time when I have been the acknowledged leader of something. I might have been someone who had some sway in terms of people would follow me in terms of, decision making of Kyron's doing this, so I'll do the same thing or follow along. Mm-hmm. But I don't recall ever being in a position where I could tell people what to do and they would have to do it. And in fact, I think looking back, one of the times I realized I wasn't cut out for leadership is that I was never drawn to it. In primary school, in grade 6, there was the crew. It was Lee, Sam, Luke, and Kyron. We were the four amigos. This is probably the whitest I've ever been, because they were the white of whites. All
we've talked about this before. This is the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, there was there was very little diversity in my primary school, and so these were my kind of 3 best friends at the time. 2 of them became school captains the next year, and one of them became a house captain for the sports day, that sort of thing. And I remember so obviously they'd reached some leadership positions, and 2 of them because the school captains at the start of the year. The sports day one, I think that was closer to the middle of the year, something like this. And I remember, there was the group session for everyone in the house, or the lead, grades 5, 6, 7 to be sports captain leader. And I remember being I could stand up right now, and all you'd have to do is get up on this you're essentially it's a classroom. Imagine a classroom. There's 50 kids in it. There's 2 or 3 teachers, and they're just discussing okay. We're going to do a voting for the school captain as leader of your house. Mm-hmm. I think we were Malula or something like that.
Malula.
Blue.
Malula.
And I remember just being like, thinking, oh, I should step up because my friend was going to do it. My two other friends were like leaders, so it was kind of like, oh, maybe I should. And just being terrified. I did not want to get up on a stage, in front of 50 people and explain why. Like, the level of convincing you need is like, I'm really passionate and I think I could do a great job leading House Malula to a win. Like, that's all you need to say. And I just didn't. I did not want to. None of that appealed to me. So that was probably one of the first points I realized, like, oh, I don't want any leadership positions at all. Sure. Like, it does not appeal to me at all. And so I'm struggling to think of a time when I have actually been in a position where I could tell people what to do. I had to train someone at my work once or twice for a new position, but I wasn't technically a leader then. It was just...
Well, look, let me dissect this a little bit. Let's get into a little bit more of the details around it, because I'm going to shock you, Mere Mortals, I think, at home, who might think, might be listening to some of the things I've done before, and you go, Juan's probably like done some leadership roles and got some good qualities around it. And I'm not going to diss myself. Sure, I probably do have some. However, if I really was to be honest, I also don't want to be a leader. Yeah. I also don't want to be in a leadership position. I'll tell you why. It's because I've looked after. See, that's why I was using the language of. I've looked after people. Like, I've managed people. I've looked after people. I could, quote unquote, be on roles where they, for want of a better word, it's called like a servant leader, because I actually didn't directly manage them, nor did they need to report to me, but I had to exert some sort of influence and get them to do something in a position where I don't really have much power or control to do much things with, right? So that being true, I don't really enjoy being the leader role. I've always thought this about myself in that I'm never, even though I like the idea of businesses and a few things, would never be a great CEO, nor like beginning of a company. And the reason being is I'm not from a pure leadership. When I think about it in that regard, it's you're that person or group of people who are driving the idea or the vision forward. You're thinking in the steps of like 17 steps ahead. And I go, that's or orientating and getting people to do a certain thing that you need them to do. And some qualities of that I think most people do have, whether it's like great or not great. And I can do some of those things, but it wouldn't be the default thing that I actually want to do. So while it might sometimes like I've talked about it in a way, I wouldn't actually say that I want to be a leader nor be in like leadership roles. But what I do want, or what I am, and I guess this is the cutting the line, is I want to be a doer. And I think sometimes in being a doer, you do end up exhibiting attributes and qualities that make a leader, right? So like example, they're down in Canberra, first. Right? So down in Canberra, right, when we're doing these things, and again, I say doing, I'll be more precise. It was a session where we're trying to rebaseline the amount of work we need to do to complete a certain project, and it needs to bring a lot of people who've got opposing thoughts and who don't really like each other and all these dynamics, right? And what I enjoyed is I like doing the activity of getting people to work, talking about certain things, asking the hard questions, really being abrupt with things, all that sort of stuff. But I would put that in the bucket of a doing. And if it was my wish, I think, now that I've done a few things into the future, I hope all role titles, which I think role titles will eventually disappear as well, but I hope it gets to a point that everyone's just called a doer. Like all the way from top to bottom, you're just a doer, and it's just doing whatever the hell it is that you need. Now AI will help that. But it kind of splits the line, because it does some qualities from leadership, but then it has some qualities from managing. Because I've also done the thing where it's managing. We actually have to manage people, and they're two very different things: to manage people and work.
Can you explain the difference?
Yeah, when you're managing a person or you're managing an individual, I'll describe it in this way: there's expectations and there's the actual, and you want to get that as close as possible to what is needed. So if you're managing a person and the expectation is the 5 days in the office and they're coming in 4 days in the office, but the company or whoever's expectation is 5, that's your management role. That's getting the individual to be at 5. And then that's where the conversations happen. Same thing when you're managing someone's performance, when you're managing a particular project to be delivered on a certain time frame, on a certain scale, on a certain budget. All of that is manage it.
I guess
managing.
That would maybe be like enforcement of the rules.
Enforcement of the rules, the leverage of power and role dynamics and all those things. Leadership is not by way of managing to a maybe a more defined, discernible goal. It is it's the overarching, it's the energy, it's the adventure for more exploration from the workplace or anything else. The leader's role is to get people giddied up to do the things, to be energized to be doing it, to go towards that like much bigger mission and North Star and whatever else in workplace perspective says it. From I'm thinking a military perspective, the leader is the one who's making some hard calls around whether you go down the path of war or not, whether you do this profession or whatnot, and then a manager or someone who's closer to the group that's actually taking the action, the direct action, is actually being the one that makes a call like, no, you got to do this, you got to do that. So leaders are a little bit more separated, I guess, to the more direct action that's happening, and it brings with it loads of different tasks depending on the role and whatnot. But they're different things. To be a manager and leader is very different.
Okay, yeah, because I would probably, in my mind, put them in very similar categories, which is I had leader as someone who kind of dictates to other people what's going on. And in my mind, even just the language I'm using, like dictating, telling people to do this, is very much this, it's a kind of like a negative feeling. I don't like the idea of being on either side of that, to be honest, of being the person who's telling people what to do and then also being told what to do. I dislike both.
I'll give you a direct example from a work perspective. So I've been in both of these positions where I've managed people, where you have to be like, hey, the expectation is I need you to be doing this by this date, in this way, in this manner, or I need you to create this outcome by a certain date.
Yeah.
You manage that. You hold the expectation. If it's met, awesome. If it's not met, what does that mean? What's kind of the repercussion?
Yeah.
But I've also been in the other role where you're a servant leader or a leader, let's just say it's just leader, that doesn't have the influence, but then you try to derive the outcome not by the ability of punishing or that expectation, but actually from either the leader doing certain things, like demonstrating the work hard perspective so that they also work hard, or by promoting or supporting that level of culture that you want as opposed to the other one. So there's, and you can have the meshing of those type of roles, but I think you can still separate it clearly, because when you have a leader that's starting to do that type of managing, will allow you being a manager as opposed to actually being a leader. So two very separate things, but I would slice it in the middle and actually say what I actually like to do is be a doer. I do like to be a doer and working with other people who are doing it. And so, yes, it does take things from the managing perspective and some things from the leadership sort of perspective qualities. But at the end, it's almost like you are doing things because either you know the right or they got the right qualities and attributes. And that also brings along people that are like, okay, cool. I see that he's doing these certain things, so I'm going to follow along and do what he says, or, do the work that I need to be doing that. But at the same time, there's a little layer of managing to making sure like you're setting expectations. You're making sure people are like, hey, I'm watching what's going on and that you are doing and not just like fucking about with the work. So yeah, there's a mixture, I think, when you come from in that space, there can be different things. And that's, I know you talked about, you were saying from a political perspective, that's why I don't really see them in, when we're saying leadership, I go, any of the political sphere, I don't see it as leadership, but under that particular definition I'm talking about, I guess is what is leadership, because they themselves are not doers. Yeah. In a way,
Let's get onto this a bit, because I want to, when you're talking about the, I guess the positive, the managing aspect, and then the leadership aspect, it reminds me of my very first actual job that I had, where it was sustained period of years where I was working in the same role, which was Rio Tinto, Hale Creek. I was a graduate engineer moving towards mining engineer, just plain and simple. And my first boss, Colombian.
Oh yeah,
it was a good start. I'm a fan of the Colombians. And Camilo was what I would call a great leader. Like I never felt that he was dictating things to me in terms of telling me what to do, even though I can recall some times where I remember one time I was super busy and like stressed out for this, had so many designs to do, had to change up this stuff. And then he comes along and he's like, hey, Kyron, like this really important thing came up and needs doing. And, at the time I'm like, well, I'm the fucking most busiest. Why are you giving it to me? But now, looking back, it's like, oh yeah, if you want something done, give it to the busiest person because they get it done. So I understand that now. But even with that being said, I'm like, he always had a very light touch. I don't ever remember him forcing me to do things or feeling like I was being told to do it. It was much more, leadership. Like, this is where we're going. If I made a fuck up, he'd kind of like protect me in the meetings or things that happened afterwards. He would be great at, not putting blame on people in scenarios where it's like a public setting or something. And then if he needed to, like, taking you aside and saying like, hey, like, this is got to do better here. Can't do this, or we've got to put some practices in place to make sure this doesn't happen again. And those were all those things where I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, this is the type of person and the skills you need to have like good leadership capabilities. And I think that reflected that because he rose up at least one rank, maybe two ranks in the time that I was there. Okay. And the like opposite of that, I guess, is some other people who, when he did move up and then I got a new boss, I'm like, oh, okay, like I can see the vast differences between a leader and someone who's been in this role for the same, like an absurd amount of period and never like moved up the ranks or I guess shown qualities of leadership, but he was necessary because like, he had a piece of paper saying that he was an accredited surveyor, and like, it's really hard to get that piece of paper. And so you need this person in this role, even though like he's not the greatest person, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, what I always associated with leadership was it's like the politicking, I guess, the having to like get on the right side of the certain people, and they're the type of people who can influence who gets the next job and things like that. And that always repelled me, partly because I'm not good at it, and then partly because it's not merit-based in terms of the actual skills of the person being able to do it. Maybe you could make the claim, and this is, I guess, getting into the political side of things, that the merit of being able to play the political games is merit in itself. But then it's like, have you got the person who can make the wisest decisions, or part of what I see for leadership and what I admire in people like Brian Armstrong from Coinbase or Eric Voorhees, for example, is they always have this really clear vision of like, I'm doing this because I want, financial freedom for the world at large, or for, whatever stated goal that it is. And someone can be asking about some other random bullshit about, interest rates, or this person's saying this or doing that, and he's doing this thing. And then they'll be like, that's nice, bring it back to here. And then this is where I'm going. And how does it kind of like fit in with that way? Yeah. So instead of like following tangents down this random stupid path of Trump tariffs or whatever, they're like, yeah, like, let's come back here, and like, this is where I'm going, and this is what I'm interested in. And that's where you see, okay, there's a lot of people who don't do that, and they're, I guess, more haphazard, the flip-floppy. There's no, like, I'm trying to make Australia the best country in the world for XYZ reason, and then it'll just be like, next thing they're bitching about this person not doing this or something like that, So this is why I don't follow politics, because I don't really feel like I see people who I describe as leaders. Yeah. I'd certainly view them more as like their own category, politicians. That how much of their time do they actually spend understanding the intricacies, nuances of the position, or of decisions that will affect like a whole lot of people's lives, versus how much time do they spend, okay, this person in this, position over here is doing this, but if I, make friends with this person. I can get some leverage, and then they'll support me in this upcoming election. And you know, how much of it is that? I don't know. You've met, I think, some of like the high ranking people. What do you? What do you get
but what I was going to say was, I think in political spheres, interestingly enough, it's like I believe the leadership qualities do come out, but it's for the party members themselves, right? So if you look at I'm just talking like Labor and Liberal parties here in Australia, there's whoever the lead is for those parties at the very least, they're very influential, and maybe they have a lot of leadership abilities within the actual party themselves. So to any of the members, whether it's minister for this or you just administrator or something else, they actually have a very strong leadership role within that domain. But when we look at from the outside in, you're like, what's going on? Like, does this person do anything? They're just talking all the time. So I think we don't get to see behind the veil of whatever calls are being made. Like, for instance, here in Australia, we just went through the federal voting, and Labor's back in, overwhelmingly so. And one of the decision points that the Prime Minister needs to make is who's going to be his cabinet, in essence, right? Now, you think about it from that way, from the external perspective, like you and me, we're like, fucking who cares? Like, as long as they're following through with what they've committed and they've put on paper, then fine, go on your merry way.
But I don't even care about that. I have no idea about any of these people.
But internally, you should care, because they're proposing to wipe out more Hexten. So.
But see, like, this is the thing. Like, that's just one random decision amongst
correct.
A million different possibilities that they could do. Like, sure. Yeah.
But within their party, right? If you were in the Labor Party, let's just say everyone involved, then there is a more significant alteration to what you're doing, because all of a sudden it's okay. This individual has to make a call. Now, yes, they're influenced and by many other people, but they've got to make their own call on who's going to be the Minister for Housing and who's going to be doing this and who's going to be doing that, and positioning all the chess pieces to make sure that everything can be, as much as we want to think about it, to deliver what they need to deliver in X amount of time, and you have to position it. So it's kind of like running, its own little business, if you like. So there's some leadership qualities, I'm sure, internally that are displayed more than what we see externally. But to us, out in the outside world, it's like, oh man, they're just politics. They're just politics. And sure, there's probably a lot of politicking that happens and influencing and favors and all that. But internally, it probably is seen as more of a leadership skill or influence. And on the external, it just seems like, politics. Like, we'd just be like, fuck, what a waste of time and energy this is being. Again, like, if you could click your fingers right now and tell me that we could get a whole suite of AI systems that could go and enact, whatever it is that's best for Australians based on voting system, and they go and propel it in an agentic way, I'd probably sign up to be like, yeah, okay, just go do it, get rid of the people, just make it happen if that's what everyone's voted on, and make it work. But again, we're probably far away from that too.
Yeah. So I did a book review of The Lucky Country by Donald Horn not too long ago. Mm-hmm. And this book was a bit random, because it was kind of, I wasn't really sure what to expect coming in.
There was a bit of politics in it.
There was a lot. There was a lot. So there was a lot about just cultural observations on the Australian spirit, the Australian character, I guess, which is kind of interesting, but also it's interesting in the respect that if I was to read a book of like the Italian character, for example, I'd maybe be going like, oh, that's interesting, or the German character, because you can see differences when you talk to a German. Like, they're a lot more straight and upfront. They don't like when you're late for things. Their efficiency, and you can kind of their humor is very different. So reading a book on that would be interesting. But then reading about the Australian character, I'm like, but I know tons of people who aren't like that. Would this be, it's kind of like looking at yourself as like, is this actually me? I don't know. How you view yourself in a mirror, I think, is different from how people view you. I mean, you're literally looking at yourself inverted, so it's not what other people see of you. You see the inversion of that. So in any case, he was, very strident on these views of politics and politicians, and was like, this is leading our country down to this certain way. His vision for the future, Australia is a second-rate country, mainly, propelled forward by luck, was his kind of like famous line, and and that sentence in itself is kind of not duplicitous, but poorly understood. Bless you. And it was all for naught. He was talking about all of these people like as if it would be enshrined in history forever. We'd be talking about these people, Menzies and shit like this. Name me a politician from pre-2000s and ask basically anyone, a politician from pre-2000s, they're just going to be like, oh,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. The only time I really have looked at a politician for something that I think was maybe admirable or displayed leadership was John Howard for when we had the Port Arthur massacre in Tasmania.
Oh, yeah.
And he, from what I gather, had to expend a lot of like political capital to then put a ban on semi-automatics and just guns in general in Australia, and I think only farmers and police officers and stuff can carry them now. Whether you agree with that or disagree with that is kind of beside the point. It's that he had a vision and then would like expend a lot of like that. It wasn't a popular decision, I don't believe, for him to do that. But he kind of forced it through on his own. And that's something I'm like, okay, that's admirable that someone would do that for what they believed in. Whether that fits in with your views or not, it's kind of irrelevant.
I guess it gets to the point of a leader, right? Of what makes a good leader when you define it that way. Because if you have to remove the emotion of it, because let's think to what you were saying about Brian Armstrong and the other likes. When you bring up the name of Elon Musk, right? If you say, is Elon Musk a good leader? And you could run the gamut of people being like, he is literally the Antichrist. He is the worst human on earth. You could go to the other side where people are like, this is the most brilliant person on earth.
Yeah.
Amazing. Like, unbelievable. But again, if you go down to the level of, but he's a good leader, like remove what you think, that emotion around that. Do you think he's a good leader? Again, how do you define leadership or a good leader or a bad leader? Would people say that Hitler was a bad leader or a good leader, right? What are the leadership skills? Again, if you remove good, bad...
Because he certainly got a country to do what
something.
He wanted.
Correct.
Like, and in a very extreme manner.
Correct.
Where it's like, well, that takes... I don't know what that takes, but that takes a lot of...
Yeah, so I think...
leadership you could call it.
Well, I was going to say, so I think leadership quality, like a leader that follows through to become a leader is... You have to have someone who believes or wants to do something, and everything that they do, let's just say, is aligned towards achieving that. So if you have, insert whoever you want, and it's like, hey, their aim is to build a home, and it's to do it maybe ethically with whatever else, and you got all these people to look after you. Again, remove the good and bad, because the good and bad is to the viewpoint of the individual who's looking at that. But if you want to describe it by good being that they've done the things of leadership, then it's just about purely meeting what their expectations or what their mission is or their vision or what they say, like what they think, they say, and they do is all aligned and want other people around that space. Then you could say, okay, that's like leadership qualities that you are exhibiting and doing. I think it's the human addition layer of is a good leader or bad leader that then gets introduced, which I can't... It murkies the waters, because to say it's a good leader, sometimes you're coming at it from the vision of like the perspective of, but is it good for me, or is it good based on what I think? Not good in that they're doing the qualities and the attributes that is needed. Again, you might have a really great leader, like Steve Jobs, right? I think most people would say he was, from a leadership perspective, like a leader, a visionary leader, let's say that wording. Because if you worked for him, again, if you've read Steve Jobs' book, you kind of go be like, this was an asshole to work with. Holy shit. And a lot of people say it's like, it wasn't because of Steve, it was in spite of Steve that a lot of stuff came to be. But whatever you may think about him, you go, I think he exhibited the qualities of leadership that is needed to achieve what was needed, which was maybe super hard-driven, hard-working. He had this... I think
inspire people.
Yeah, he had this thing called like this magnetic... what was it? Like vision, like delusional field or something like that they call it. Basically, he'd go into a meeting and people are like, we're going to make this work and we'll need about 6 months. And he'd be like, great guys, 2 weeks. We're going to do it in 2 weeks. And everyone would be like, what the fuck's going on? But he'd lead them into, we can do it in 2 weeks. Elon Musk does the same thing. So there's a lot of qualities that a leader, if you just broaden it, would be great. That's fantastic. It's different to a manager. So it's very different. But then when you lay with the good and bad, that's where it starts becoming a little bit complex and baffling to people, because that's a human touch to what a leader, I guess, should be. Again, let's go to other leaders that quote unquote history says it's great, right? So Eisenhower, right? Churchill, people go like, man, they were great leaders, right? Okay, well, I think people are saying they're great leaders in the acts of what was needed, which was, bringing the alliance in to defeat the opposing party and the enemy. Do you think people during World War II in Germany would have said that, Churchill's a great leader? Yeah. And I think they would have, right? They probably would have been like, fuck this guy. Right? So there's opposing views depending on that. But if you've cemented on the quality of what a leader is, because I think like Churchill wasn't that great at other things. And in fact, before World War II and after World War II, dude got kicked out of politics. So like, man, we don't want you here. You're a wartime leader. You're not a peacetime leader. Yeah. So again, time and place for them. But for him, like say Eisenhower or Churchill, it's, hey, you needed to bring people together for a common cause, to be able to defeat an enemy, to be able to do this, to send people to war, to death, all of these various things. And it's like, okay, they exhibited the qualities probably in their mindset of brutality and discipline and whatever to make it happen. And so it's good for that, but those qualities can change.
Yeah. Let's jump more into that after the Boostagram Lounge, I think. So for those who are wondering at home, Boostagram Lounge is where we like to thank the supporters of the podcast, people who have particularly helped out monetarily. And we do this through a variety of means. You can use the PayPal down below in the links, and also on podcasting 2.0, modern podcasting apps. You can send a boost in. And I know we definitely got one for this week, and I think we got some streaming as well.
Yeah, so I'll call it the streaming. Look, we've had a few come through from the late bloomer actor.
Yeah. And these were mostly for the book reviews, I believe.
The late bloomer actor was from Month of Goals.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Lyceum was for the book reviews.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
Yeah, very nice to see streams and that coming through there. And we have one from Petar.
And sorry, there are other people who stream. Those are the ones that stream through True Fans, because it comes through a little bit differently. Yep. But for the other streamers out there, thank you. In any case, it's just not as visible at this moment.
And the big 6666 from Fountain by Peter says, Karen, how would you characterize the Canuck small talk? Enjoy your travels, guys.
They're solid. They got good small talk. Yeah,
they do? Okay.
It much more.
The Canucks.
I felt the friendliness of the Canadian nice. If you want to compare it,
Canadian nice.
Have to go to Minnesota to compare the two. Is Minnesota close to Canada? That would make sense.
Yeah, it's very close. Yeah. I wouldn't be far away at all.
And yeah, they're great. Great at small talk. There's you'll get. I could easily see yourself having to add on like 15 minutes each day for
small talk.
Okay. Just in terms of if you're exiting a building, we're coming out of Peter's building or going into it. We got trapped in a trapped is a strong word, but 10 minutes of small talk with a guy who was fucking bonkers. This guy was nuts. He was talking about wanting to shoot people in Mexico and had his gun out ready to shoot police officers and stuff. I'm just like, why are you telling us to random strangers that you were willing to shoot someone in the head for like almost no reason? This guy was bonkers, but
good small talk, bro.
Yeah, captivating. So yeah, Canadians have great small talk.
Wow. Sure. Okay.
Much more aligned with Australian small talk than Americans, I think.
I would imagine so. Yep. Yeah. No, thank you very much, Peter, and everyone who's been streaming through as well for that notes.
Yeah. I was going to say, probably a lot of it separating the end outcome from the actual ability of a leader. So for me, it was more of if I had to, give a rough definition, it would be something like the ability to inspire and get people to change their behavior would probably be into behavior into the form that you want in particular.
Let's make it easier. This will be weird, but I think it'll make it easier, right? You can think of the concept of leadership just with yourself. Purely with yourself. Forget other people. Don't get any more influences, because, again, here comes the distinction between manager, leadership, and doer. So you can manage yourself, right? You can say, you get your Excel spreadsheet or your book out and you go, today I'm going to read 1 hour. I'm going to do this things. I'm going to do that. And
and punish yourself for every time that you do.
Or congratulate yourself with it, right? But that's managing. That's managing. That's the discipline. That's making sure that you're mapping it through. It's more quantifiable. All those things. That's managing yourself, and you can do that well. Or poorly, but you can do that of yourself. You can manage to have the leadership abilities, and again, you can to yourself is: do you have your vision, your ethics, your morals, your vision statement, the identity who you want to play, and then basically getting yourself to a state of whether it's something bad or something good or an activity or an action or a task, and kind of aligning yourself up into that. That's kind of being a leader for yourself. So again, get the example to other people, but I like it in oneself, because if you want to be a good leader, even to yourself in the moments when you don't want to, or maybe you're doing the wrong things, or maybe you are doing the wrong things, it's having that internal leadership structure within oneself to go, but fuck, I'm doing this because of this particular reason. And usually I guess maybe that's determined as an identity or your missions or your values, all those sort of things. But that, in other ways, it's kind of you're being a leader for yourself. Maybe you call, like you're saying, you noted down for your monthly goals around, I want to make sure that I'm not, either confident or
being more courageous.
Or there was courageous, but also not being emotionally down about the fact of,
whatever it is,
whatever it may be. So there's that lines, but to be a leader for yourself is not micromanaging yourself, not tracking it down, but actually going, I noted that down last month. I've got to hold myself, I've got to hold these values, I've got to hold these standards for myself. So I think that is your concept of leadership. To again, you're going broader, and then there's that distinction that I go, and then you can be kind of the doing, and the doing is the connector strings to leadership, where it's you set the standard, the expectation, the idea, the values, all of that, and then it's in the, and I think more, it's in between, because it's kind of the discipline of the doing. It's cool. Now you have to go ahead and put in that action and put in that effort, and that connects you up to what the expectations of the leader is, but it's to do. So you can talk all you want about doing a one-hand handstand, or becoming a better runner, or doing your cardio, or doing your gym, or eating better, but it's until you're doing that in itself is what unlocks it. And again, I'm doing the example for oneself. You got to do it, but similarly, when you're extrapolating that out to looking after people or a team, if you're playing soccer or you're playing sports, generally, what makes a good leader when you're in a soccer team, right? If I was to say what makes a good leader when I'm in the team, I want someone who's leading from the front. They're fucking making the hard runs. They when they score, the opposing team score a goal and the heads downs. They're the ones who are heads up, still a couple of minutes in it, guys. Let's do this. And what are they doing, right? They're reminding everyone of, hey, there's still some time. They've still got stuff. You got to put yourself in a positive position, all that sort of stuff. Someone who might be managing might be hey, Charlie, fucking, you got to be over here next time. And you got to do this and do that. And part of that a leader can do, but
that's
exclusively becomes a little bit more of that. There's more of the tactical to the specifics, but then the leader's kind of going, it's the rallying, it's the reminder of getting you back into the position. So, people who've played soccer and who've had a good captain, you kind of can very easily retain and be what was the leadership abilities that they had? Oh, well, they were confident and loud, or capable when you needed to be. They always put the extra effort or energy when they needed to be. Maybe it's a coach, where a coach is fuck, they showed up, and even though they were hard, but they were really, really on it, as opposed to just managing expectations. That is all the different, I guess, examples that I go, those are those inherent differences when you see it either in oneself or those other familiar places, where it's being a leader is very different to managing oneself. And again, I think the connector is the doing things.
I like this kind of distinction, because there's something a little contradiction here for myself, which is recently I've had this in my mind for a long time, but I've wanted to learn more about Lee Kuan Yew. So
Lee Kuan
Yew, I believe is how you pronounce it.
Yep.
Do you know who that is?
The name is familiar. I don't know from where though.
Yeah, so he was the Prime Minister of Singapore for a long time, or president. I don't know what position it was. I think it was Prime Minister. And basically, people credit him as single-handedly dragging Singapore from third world shithole
to what it is today.
Being a bit meme there in terms of calling it shithole, but maybe it was. I don't know. But in terms of turning a very, very small country into a financial superpower, raising standard of living to an insane
Crazy
level
levels,
compared to neighboring countries, and they're essentially very similar people in terms of the character and makeup of the people compared to neighboring countries. So like what is so different about Singapore? And what I particularly want to know about him is the kind of vision that he had, and why he believed why he had this vision in spite of like all contrary evidence. I'm assuming at the time saying, there's a poor country, it's going to remain a poor country in comparison to others. And then the aspect of, I guess, of how he went about doing it. But it's probably more the vision that attracts me to people. And that's why, it's a politician. You'd think like, God, there's probably the last thing I'd want to read about. Like, I have no intention of reading about Robert Menzies' biography or something, who is an Australian politician. But from the minor aspects I've heard of him, like, I don't know anything about the vision. But it's also the results that Lee Kuan Yew, like, produced, he did it. Yeah. And because you can think of like plenty of people who produce great results as a leader, but maybe their leadership was maybe not so great. This is where I kind of think of Steve Jobs. Like, he built Apple. Like, that's a wonderful, amazing achievement. But it sounded like maybe it's hard to tell. Like, was he the type of person who actually inspired these people, or was, the product just so good that people who were working for him, like, did he get 110% out of these people, which is what maybe some people would say, or maybe he got 90% and they would have been at 100% if he was less of an arsehole. Yeah. This is the kind of questions. And so I kind of look at that for myself in some reasons, which is the vision aspect, and why I'm not suited for leadership, which is I don't have the belief in a lot of things. When I think of getting a muscle up, for example, I had basically zero belief that I could ever get that until one day I got it. Even the day before, I would have said, not that it was impossible. It was certainly, when I first started going to the gym, like, a muscle up was impossible. That was like it. I didn't have the vision of seeing like Kyron where he is now and Kyron in 4 years. I think my future prediction abilities is not so great. I can't see that far forward. I can see, okay, this is what you have to do to get there, and then managing myself to do that. But the actual vision, inspiration is severely lacking in myself. And so it's like I compensate by just doing and managing really well. And so that's why, leadership for myself would certainly be not something I'd inspire. I find it very hard that I'd inspire people to change their behavior, because for myself, it's
that's exactly because you yourself don't do it like that. You're more you're good at the sequencing and breaking it down to what you need to do, but the vision, like the aspirational view, the story that you need to paint, that's not like a default easy thing that comes along.
I can look a day, a week, maybe a month ahead and say, this is what I'm going to do, and it's kind of like fingers crossed it'll get me to where I want to go. Another time I remember, so I'd split up with my first girlfriend, and I was just trying to be like, I think it'd been like a month or two maybe, and I had almost zero interactions with other women in that time, and that was just because I was working out in the mines, just my lifestyle wasn't putting me in contact with people, and I'm like, okay, fuck, I'm gonna be single forever. That was the feeling at the time. Yep. Maybe it was true. And I remember, sitting down with my goals and spending, like, we've got a book at home with kind of like a rough draft of how the 8 categories of
like the goal breakdown.
Of partner, relationships, travel, spirituality, character,
finances,
all those sorts of things. How that eventually formed, and I remember just having this thing where it was like, I sure at the moment I'm writing down things, and this is kind of like what I'm looking for, probably in my 30s, and I was writing that when I was about 24-ish, I think, 2016. Yeah, it would have been 24, and I went like, okay, well, the vision and stuff, it's kind of like hazy, but this is a rough idea of where I want to go to. And I just remember being like, okay, I don't know how I can do this. Like the problem, I don't know how to solve this problem in terms of like being single, for example. But all I remember was like, okay, I have solved similar problems to this before through like energy, in terms of, it was almost like the belief in myself, like, okay, I can solve it. I know it doesn't feel like it at the moment, but this is something that I can do, and I have done before. Maybe it's on a bigger scale that I need to do it now. And that was probably like the one time I've shown like leadership and inspiration for myself, which was this feeling of malaise of like, I can't do it. I don't know how to do it. I'm always going to be this way. And it was like, no. Like with energy, if you apply yourself to something, you can do anything. And, it seems so funny now being like, the problem was, it wasn't like climbing Mount Everest with being handicapped and only having one arm and one leg. It was like, you just got to find a girlfriend. Like, okay, you should be able to.
Different,
but look, there's probably people out there right now who
think that it's
feeling that exact same feeling of the impossibility of the task ahead of them. And, that's where like I've shown leadership for myself. It's like maybe this happens once every couple of years in terms of, same thing for the one arm. For a long time, I just felt like I can't do that. I don't know how to do this. It's like my wrists are hurting. This goal seems so far off. And I was like, fuck it. I'm going to stick at it. I'm going to now devote everything I can to it for this year in particular. And now I'm seeing strides and be like, oh, okay, I can see in maybe a year, I could be at this position and actually getting 15-second holds, 20-second holds, things like that. So, yeah, I really like that breakdown of the vision, leadership, the doing aspect, and then the managing aspect, and how they
different. But of course, they're like they interplay with one another pretty well.
Have you ever had moments where you've like felt down in the dumps, like I don't know how to do this, and not seeing how you can get there, but it's almost like I just have to believe I can get there, and then you can do the managing and the doing to get there? Or one's default inspired?
I don't know if I know what you're talking about. I don't know if I've really felt that way before in any like deep way. There's definitely been like sometimes between jobs, I might think like, oh, do I really want to pursue this path, or do I go somewhere else? But it doesn't generally last long, which is a good thing. Like I think mentally that's always been a good thing. It doesn't become too difficult. I think it's because I've never thought about it in that extreme negative way, but I've never also thought about it in the extreme positive way, I guess. So it's very neutral, at least in that relation. So there's no terribleness of not thinking or having to put the vision together to do it. But, and this is kind of know about myself, I've never had a vision so strong and so like powerful that I've like continued to devote everything to it. For me, it might have a good idea about something and then I'll change my track just because something interesting comes up and something else, that does happen. So I think I'm fortuitous in that way, where it's not a lot of negative, but also it just means I also don't get the positives that come out from the other and having strong visions. But I think I was going to say from where you want to get to, I guess, and again from a leader, like I like the thing about vision is if you want to be a good leader or leadership as a whole, it's one of those statements where you're not aiming for the right thing, kind of like happiness. You don't aim to be happy. Happiness ensues from other things that you do. I think similarly with leadership, you can't just be like, I'm going to be a better leader. That's not how it works. You have to kind of tackle the breakdown of skills of form a leader, and we kind of talked about a few of these here, but you kind of have to go define them by what it means in whatever space that you're looking for. You aim for those, you improve on those, and then that will eventually make you either a leader for yourself or for other people. But then it's much easier to be the manager or the doer, because there you've got very defined set of skills that you can build upon. And I mean, doing is pretty straightforward. It's doing, but it's just about the repetitions that you do around it that build up the continuousness of it. Leadership's just a little bit different, where I think you have to attack different other skills and ideas and efforts to then it congregate to become, okay, good, you're now a good leader in whatever space it is that you're after, right? And lots of things that break down. But look, ultimately, if you're listening to the Mere Mortals Musings and you go like, oh, do I have to be a leader? Like, do I have to be a great leader? Am I going to have to be a manager or something else?
How many leaders do you think there are in terms of percent of the population?
Yeah, I'd say very few. Like, I'd say such a minute amount that would be true leaders, whether it's like visionary leaders or like the disciplined leaders. I'd say it's very few. And the people who are in positions of leadership generally are just due to tenure, generally are more managers than now leaders, or it's just a position that they found themselves in, but not a true leader where you can come away going, oh, wow. And again, the definition that breaks it down, you go, oh, this person had this vision and this energy and this, complete oneness of view towards this particular, and that's what I think makes up a leader. And whatever else, that would be so rare. I in fact maybe have come across a handful of leaders that I would call like, man, they're like true leaders only a handful of times.
Yeah, I'd be thinking like 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000 if I had to put some numbers to it. Yeah. You said good leader a bunch of times. No, it reminds me of something I've said before, which is I think Hitler was a great leader, but not a good leader. Yeah, and this is where it's, he was, if you look at his like old speeches and stuff, like the dude was infectious in terms of like having a crowd before him, like an amazing orator. Obviously, apparently, stories of his inner circles was, he was like a compassionate guy with the people around him, very caring, very driven, like worked super hard, all of these sorts of things. But, he wasn't a good leader in terms of the direction that he was leading the country. Now, was he, and there's a question about leadership as well, which is, are they ones who are able to shift like the general tide of the feeling in the air? So, for example, 1920s, 1930s Germany was in a terrible place. Treaty of Versailles was like incredibly harsh on them. They were paying these reparations, the hyperinflation and stuff. Everything was just going wrong with their country. And then this guy pops up and it's, he directs that energy towards this kind of very violent outcome of World War II. Or did he create it? There's the kind of great man of history question a lot of people ask, was this going to happen in any case?
I still think it's going to happen in any case. I generally don't believe the great man of history or the great woman of history. I think it's more the case of they were the person in history that was in that time period, but someone else was going to step into that place.
That's my feeling as well, especially after reading kind of pre-war books. So Coming Up for Air by George Orwell. It's a pretty fucking rubbish book, to be honest. Like it's not a great book, but I think he really explained clearly in it this feeling of war that was in the air and at the time, and its almost inevitability. And a lot of people, I've read many books of time periods like this where there is something like everyone can kind of sense it and it doesn't feel like it's because of this person. It feels like it's going to happen no matter what. A good one is the one of the Sherlock movies with Robert Downey Jr. and Moriarty is like creating this big plan to like assassinate this Duke, which will kind of kick off the war and things like this. And he gets caught. And he's like, "Look, they're going to do it anyway. I'm just speeding up the process and going to make myself incredibly rich from it. But they're going to do it anyway." And that was kind of my feeling as well. The only last thing I wanted to talk about in terms of leadership was this idea of having the like a great leader is the one who it's in the decisive moments, everything leading up, and it's when like the shit hits the fan. Yep. That's when the true leader shows their form. And I don't know how to feel about this one, because I sometimes agree with it and sometimes not, because it's certainly easy to see when people fuck up.
I think I'll define it. I'll try to define it another way. I think it's the great leader is the accountable one. So you can have responsibility and you can be accountable. And often it's the responsible person that does things is a different person generally. But I would say a great leader is the accountable one. And that is whether things go good or bad, shit, or fucking fantastic, they can take the accolades, or like maybe a really great leader will distribute the accolades across people. But when shit goes bad or things doesn't go their way, they're the accountable, and even though they're not responsible, the great leader will go, all on me.
Yeah, so an example of this would be the Bybit hack, which was pretty recent, about a month ago. I think it's the biggest hack in certainly crypto history. I don't know if just history in general, in terms of a digital asset that has been
I don't know, comparison
stolen.
to like other things. Yeah, I don't know.
1.5 billion of Ethereum, which funnily enough, like billion just seems so laughably small to me.
Well, now in the concept of like how big all the crypto stuff is.
Well, just the world in general, like even the value of $1 trillion is like, US is printing $1 trillion or whatever. There's nothing.
Nothing.
I don't know. My value distortion. But then I'm like, wait, if you have like 1 billion, that's 1,000 millions. That's a lot of fucking things, man. So, it's weird. But anyway, people say like he handled the hack. Like that's the best anyone's ever seen someone handle a hack. Got on calls immediately, was calm, even though the situation was still unfolding. Very transparent. Was able to prove that they had funds, get liquidity loans, so that even though all of these let everyone withdraw from what they thought they had in this exchange, and they did actually have it, so they could withdraw, and then all that money immediately piled back afterwards when it was like, oh, okay, that they're actually solvent, it's fine. Sure, they lost a whole bunch of money, but that's just money that they've lost themselves, and 1.5 billion to someone like Bybit's not actually that much. Compare that to other situations where there's been hacks or people saying all the good things, but then not actually doing the good things in terms of letting people withdraw and access their money.
Well, I mean, would you say Sam Bankman-Fried was a great leader?
I mean, he's one where you can say he was neither a great leader nor a good leader. He was just he was just somehow a leader. And yeah, I find that kind of funny. There's another guy when I was looking into the first AI agent little craze that came up, and this guy called Shaw who created which one did he create? I'm blanking on it now. It's not Virtuals, but one of the other ones. AI 16Z, I think. And
what? AI 16C.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And he created this thing, and like he's one who's kind of has the vision, but is such a loose cannon that he's all over the shop. His framework of the AI landscape makes sense, but his personal ability to communicate with people and just personality in general is like degen fucking retarded, dude, is how I'd put it. For example, he was talking about his kind of history, and he keeps on working with these people who fuck him over, and he's like, these people fucked me over, this person did this, and then I got fucked over, and it's like, okay, well, this guy who has almost zero accountability for why do you keep working with these people if they keep fucking you over? Like how poor is your sense of character judgment if this keeps on happening to you?
Telltale sign.
And this is one of those ones where it's like, okay, yeah, you can have someone with the vision, but there's also other aspects, perhaps maybe the managing aspect is what he's terrible at, which is he can't see the, because he's good at doing things as well. Like he knows how to code, he can create stuff, he has the vision, but then the managing aspect is he's not good at going, okay, like this needs to be in place. should I analytically work with this person, or how much do I know about them? Maybe I should separate some of my work or some of the funds from them. So, creating agreements and, okay, this person, do they have any red flags?
Yeah, like
all those
the
sorts
practicalities or the realities of building something or doing something with other people. It seems like it's missing there. But again, that's like, you can have some qualities that are leadership qualities, right? Leadership-like qualities, and then others that you're like, what's going on? So yeah, I like the distinction actually of like, there's a good leader and then the great leader. And again, I think there's just so few great leaders, great leaders, that for you to take examples of other people as well is like so few and far between, because sometimes people just, it's luck and things go well and they succeed, but perhaps they were just managing things, or they're just the right person at the right time and it just worked out for them. But push comes to shoves and be in a separate location where you go like, oh man, they're not a great leader. What the hell? I thought they were. It's like, yeah, just situation or the ability to like repeat it. I'm blanking on who the president was at this time, and it was around Eisenhower's time. It's in the latest book that I was reading from Ryan Holiday, and in Justice, and there was like so many chapters and things about him that displayed leadership-like qualities. Well, not important who the actual president is, but this particular president was both in public and like expending, capital, like leadership, like capital, but also just in person and the things that he was doing. There was all these things where he was doing it for the public good, but he was also doing it because that's just his qualities and ways of being that would make you go, holy shit, this person showed leadership-like abilities in relation to justice over and over and over and over and over again. And there was other examples in that particular justice book of people basically getting killed or dying because they're standing up for the things that they care about. Some of that is what makes a good leader, right? But again, leadership has other qualities, vision, and a few other things that come along with it. So, look, leadership for me it's a very hard concept to try to like define, because you can have such variety of it. And if you really care about it at home of being a good leader, I would say think about whatever you want to apply it for and break it down to the general attributes. Again, use AI. There are lots of good ways to do this, but break it down to the general attributes that you care about for the particular endeavor. Again, if you want to be the captain of a soccer team, it's very different than if you want to be the leader of your local, like your local working team. Now, there's slightly different things that might come along with it. There's probably like very similar skills and then some that are not similar, and separate that from the managing things. And above all else, if I had to give any recommendation, is no matter what, be a doer. Do the things, whether it's yourself managing or managing other people, or you're leading yourself or leading other people. If you're a doer, you get things done, whether it's, that's why we talk about a lot about goals or the things that we're after. As long as you're doing stuff and it's directed action, not just action, but directed action, that's positive, you'll get very close to the things that you actually want in any case.
Yeah. For me, I'd probably say something like, I think a lot of people can be good leaders in terms of making a positive impact on their society or whatever they're forming part of the, like I said, the soccer team, the community garden that you work in, things like this, and which is that'd sort of be like, having a nice vision of where you think you could get to, how you could do this sustainably and ethically, and being nice to people, making sure people feel welcome in the community and stuff like that. Being a great leader, like that requires the timing, the luck, the personal characteristics, everything else, which would, I put tons of people in the category of good leaders, probably like the Nelson Mandela, the Gandhi. Yeah, that comes to mind. Like they didn't have these single decisive moments of like, Gandhi was literally a non-doer. Like his whole philosophy was don't do anything.
Don't do anything. Yeah.
So
don't eat for an extended period of time until they do what you need them to do. That's basically it. Yep.
Pretty much. But they seemed like, and once again, this isn't talking about like their character as people. Lots of these people were apparently like Martin Luther King. Another one was just like, womanizer, fucking around. Robert RFK. RFK. Yeah. It's too many fucking too many Kennedys, man. apparently he was a super womanizer as well, but
JFK.
JFK, that's the one. He was probably more of I guess like good, greatish leader, that sort of thing. So look, most people are not cut out to be leaders of any sorts. I am one of those. So like, hands up. It's okay. Yeah, you don't have to be like that.
Not many. Like I don't. It's rare. Like to find a just default natural leader, it would be 1 in a million. Maybe.
And then even working to be one,
is a challenging ask.
Yeah, sure, you might get paid more, but is it worth your sanity, your health, all these sorts of things?
Yeah, and I think the hidden thing that people don't see is like to be a great leader, and again, explain to what. Okay, let's say you're a great leader at work. Does that mean you're a great leader in a family unit? Are you a great leader then to other things that you do? Maybe not, right? And like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, right? These people, great leaders, let's just say, if you were to believe that they get things done, but then you look at personal side of things or physical health, right? Are you a great leader when it comes to your health? Are you a great leader when it comes to your family unit? Probably not. Not if you're having to exert that much effort to be great in those spaces. Yeah. So it comes with some takeaways. And then if you really want to say like, oh yeah, but you're a great leader at everything, I'd say, fuck off. Like, show me someone who's great leadership quality across every single domain, and I'll be like, that's not a mere mortal.
Yeah. Wanting to be a CEO seems like an absurd goal to have. For me, it would be like, you should, if you ever happened to you, it would be like, it's something that happens to you. You created a company that accidentally was super popular, and you're like, well, this is important for my vision of the world, but being a CEO just seems to drain your health. The amount of stress, the amount of time, the amount of things you have to give up to manage a company of any sort.
One of the things people like, I guess, generally don't understand that if you're the CEO or in a position of leadership like that, then what generally happens is that you have to deal with the hardest, toughest problems that no one else in the business can deal with. So you are continuously dealing with all the toughest problems. Otherwise, someone else is going to be dealing with them. Yeah. So imagine that. Imagine a position where every day you have to deal with the toughest, most annoying, most brutal things, whether it's legal battles or funding,
entrenched political games that are impossible to weed out.
And at the end, it's the leaders with like strong visions and discipline, and who cares about everything else, that do maybe come out on top because hey, they're going to do whatever no matter what because of this pure vision that they're going to do. But again, that takes away from other things in their life. So be wary, mere mortalites.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, I don't know if there's any comments on the tube. I'll just quickly check before we
probably worth doing that. So this is, once again, for those who are tuning in now, this will be coming out very shortly after recording. The monthly goals that we recorded will be the week afterwards. There will probably be a week or two gap. I might be able to do an episode with Juan just before he leaves and when I arrive in Hamburg. So potential for a little mini episode there that'll break the gap. But if not, we'll be coming to you mid-June from Greece. And so there's probably going to be some weeks gaps unless Juan is able to record some stuff.
Yeah, if I can, I will. Otherwise, look, they'll just be aware. We're going to be traveling a lot. We'll do our best with it. But if you really want to, you can go back and check basically 1,000 episodes that we put together if you're really missing us that much.
We're approaching 500 for the ones we've done together that are called Meanderings and Musings.
Yep.
Add on to that 40 monthly goals, add on to that couple of hundred conversations, add on to that
all the book reviews,
400 book reviews plus.
There's plenty in there.
There's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah. Plus all the individual stuff, plus the Mere Morpheus, plus
Mere Mortals Emotion, Mere Morpheus,
Plenty. The Valley for Valley, man. There's lots in there. All right, let's leave it there, Mere Mortalites. Thank you very much for everyone tuning in live. Until next time.
Yep. Peace out.
Be well. One out.
Current out.
Bye.